Everyone, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Please stand and join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, will you call the roll, please?
Vice Chair Burton,
Present.
Commissioner Puppy, Commissioner Ragsdale,
Present.
Commissioner Kupsick,
Here.
Commissioner Damasio,
Here.
Commissioner Bassler,
Here.
Commissioner Trupiano,
Here.
Alternate Hester, Alternate Manuel,
Here.
Alternate Belshi, Alternate McDonald. Double check he's not online. And we have Alternate Manuel seated for District 1.
Thank you, Ms. Hernandez. Next agenda item is approval of the minutes of September 10th, 2024, Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting. Are there any edits to the minutes? If not, may I have a motion, please?
I move that we approve the minutes of the September 10th Planning and Zoning meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? Minutes passed. First item tonight is 3A, Ventana Ranch 2, Minor General Plan Amendment, Case PLZU-24-0001. This is a public hearing. Mr. Galika.
Vice Chair, members of the Commission, thank you. Ken Galika, Planning Manager, presenting the two items on the agenda together this evening. I will present as they are related to the same property. The first being the general plan amendment that you mentioned, Chair, and the second being a rezoning concerning the same land. So when I get to the conclusion of my presentation, Commission will hold separate public hearings and conduct separate motions on each, but to save everybody some time and me going over some of the same details twice, we'll present them together. So the property that we're discussing tonight is located essentially at the northeast corner of Southern Avenue and Watson Road. It doesn't actually include I think about 5 to 10 acres that are actually at the hard corner. That's under separate ownership, but includes all the property that surrounds that, both to the north and to the east. The reason that there are two boundaries drawn on these map exhibits are the rezoning request and the general plan amendment request apply to slightly different areas, and I'll explain kind of what those requests are as I go through my presentation. But the blue boundary is the boundary of the rezoning. That's approximately 52.4 acres, and the yellow boundary, if you're looking at the left exhibit, the aerial photo, is approximately 43.87 acres. You can see based on the aerial photograph, currently to the north of the property is agricultural land. There is a planned residential community, single-family subdivision on that property. Existing single-family residential to the west includes Riata West as well as the Sonoran Vista subdivision. This is a bit of an older aerial, so you're not seeing the Ross Dress for Less distribution center, but that's occupying that large property to the south. And then of course, the Walmart distribution center to the west of that, which has been a Buckeye staple, I guess, for many decades now. Directly to the east of this site is a county island, properties that are not annexed into the city of Buckeye, with a variety of either residential, large lot, agricultural type of uses, as well as some kind of home, cottage industry types of uses as well. The zoning of the property as it stands today is planned residential. The PR zone is, as it sounds, to accommodate single-family residential subdivisions. So today, if somebody wanted to develop this property without having to rezone it, you could build single-family homes on it. And then the existing general plan land use map on the right side of your screen, the property is neighborhood, which is, as it sounds, designed to accommodate neighborhoods, single-family residential, multifamily residential, as well as commercial supporting uses, retail, restaurants, et cetera, that serve the population in the area. The first of the two requests, the first agenda item on your agendas is the minor general plan amendment request. And what that would do is change a 43.87 acre portion of the site from neighborhood to business commerce, which is that red color that's indicated on that map exhibit. Business commerce land use category, what is it? This is a category that accommodates development of community and regional serving commercial, office, and business park with an emphasis on walkability to surrounding neighborhoods. So we have the neighborhood category, which is primarily for residential. I've taken many cases before you for employment, which is that blue color to the south. That's primarily for industrial uses. The red is essentially a commercial type of category, but does definitely allow for business park and some light industrial uses so long as they're appropriate scale for the area that they're proposed. How is it different from the employment? Really talking about scale and design. The types of buildings that you'll see in business commerce with light industrial uses, they won't be typically be the million square foot type of buildings we see in employment. They would be things that are much more toned down in terms of scale to the adjacent neighborhoods. The second request is to rezone the property, the entire 52.4 acres, so that includes the area that I just mentioned for the general plan amendment, as well as the adjacent acreage that surrounds that corner that's not included, total of 52.4 acres. It will be a rezone to PAD and create two separate distinct sub-areas, each with their own permitted use lists and development standards and design standards. Excuse me, PAD-A, which, my mouse moving, is the area that wraps the corner. That will be a area designated for commercial development with the uses tailored based on the C1 and C2 zoning districts in the city. We have narrowly tailored it down to exclude certain things like mini storage and car washes, things that we've had a recent kind of abundance of proposals for in an attempt to get different types of commercial uses on this corner to serve the community, full set of needs in the community surrounding. The PAD-B area, the larger area on the east side of the property, that's based upon primarily the BP, the Business Park District, with some I-1 types of standards as well. We have narrowly tailored that down as well to restrict any sort of heavier industrial uses, and the development standards within that would be based on the city's business park district with two exceptions, so I'll talk about that in just a second. As far as uses go, everything here would be enclosed, interior, light industrial, or office, or even some limited commercial uses within the buildings, nothing exterior. The two exceptions or two modifications that I mentioned, the first would allow for taller buildings than what the code would typically allow in BP. Typically, the code would allow for a maximum of 50 feet. This would increase that height by 15 feet up to 65. You can request these types of modifications through a planned area development, and what the city asks for, usually when somebody asks for more, is to give us a corresponding increase in the standard that really gets toward creating the desired effect. And in the case of limiting height, you're trying to reduce the impact of a project on adjacent residential, and we're going to get at that here with the corresponding setback increase. So buildings would be required to be set back at least 75 feet from any residential property line, whereas normally they would only be required to be set back 50. All the other standards within this PAD are per code. It's important to note, staff has recommended some conditions as part of this approval that we feel are vital in making sure this project is consistent or complementary to the planned and existing residential uses in the area. Those two conditions specifically would restrict the maximum building area within the PADB area to a maximum of 200,000 square feet, as well as prohibit cross-dock facilities, or the warehouses that have loading doors on both sides where trucks come in, drop off inventory, and then it gets shipped out from the other side. The proposals, both of them, are consistent with the neighborhood and business commerce land use designations as proposed on the site. Of course, approval of the general plan amendment would be needed to consider approval of the rezoning. If the property would remain with the neighborhood designation, we couldn't consider those business park types of uses on this site. With the recommended conditions, highlight that again, we do feel that the proposals would result in appropriate transition, both in terms of intensity of use, as well as the scale, visual character of the use, between the larger Ross Distribution Center or Walmart to the south of Southern Avenue to all of the residential uses occurring to the north. We do feel that the proposal will have benefits from a land use compatibility as well as economic development standpoint, furthering several goals and certainly responds to market trends. And again, heavier industrial uses are not permitted. This would be enclosed light industrial uses, not visible from adjacent properties. So you wouldn't have the loading docks facing the street. The development and design standards within the PAD are consistent with code. I mentioned the one modification that's proposed, and we feel it's a fair trade-off to do the additional height in exchange for the additional setback. There are adequate buffering and screening requirements also proposed within the PAD. And then the last step would be a site plan review in the future that would come back before the Planning and Zoning Commission. As is typical, the developer will complete all the adjacent Half Street improvements. That's both to Southern Avenue to the south, as well as Watson Avenue to the west, and will be served by city water and sewer. There's a well site proposed within this PAD as well. We had our typical public process for this. There was a neighborhood meeting back in August. We had about 10 attendees, not including staff and the applicant's team. It was a mixed response, to be honest. Some folks that came out to the meeting seemed to be either in favor or at least neutral toward the proposal, while others just expressed some concerns with any sort of commercial or light industrial uses, wanting to see real residential kind of development in the area. All of the required notices have been completed. The typical 500-foot mailing, signs on the property, as well as legal advertisements. Applicant also decided to go above and beyond what the current code requires and go door to door to all the owners within the 500 feet. And you know, we applaud them for that outreach, and I think it was beneficial for them. We did, I don't note it here, but we did receive some additional correspondence since the packet went out last week. I think we've received one additional letter or email in opposition to the project, as well as one letter that is in support of the project. Both of those were provided to you this evening. And then just conclude by saying staff does recommend approval of both the general plan amendment as well as the rezoning. The rezoning subject to conditions A through P, which include those restrictions on building size as well as prohibition on cross-dock facilities. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know the applicant, Bill Lally, with Tiffany and Bosco is here as well and would like to give the commission a brief presentation.
Any questions or comments from the commission? Starting with you, Mr. Tripiano.
In your presentation, didn't you said that crossdock be prohibited?
Vice Chair, Commissioner Trupiano, staff is recommending a condition that would prohibit cross-dock facilities in this PAD, yes.
Because what you handed us earlier is crossed out that.
Yeah, so Chair, maybe I'll clarify what I passed out earlier. What I passed out earlier is the proposed modifications to the stipulations that Bill will be asking for.
Oh, okay.
That's not staff's recommendation.
Okay, now I understand what's going on here. And the other thing was, I think if I remember in the packet, one of the oppositions that came up was there was going to be a gas station on one of the corners. Which one is that proposed for?
Yeah, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioner Trupiano, that discussion was about the northwest corner, so not part of this property at all. There is a gas station proposal that's working its way through development services right now. That property is already zoned for commercial uses, so we're just working on the design and whatnot. So that was, for at least a couple of the residents in attendance, that was the primary source of their concern.
And they will do the half-street improvements past their area to all the way to Watson, correct?
They will do all of their adjacent half-street improvements, including, I believe, the portion of the street adjacent to the exception parcel, but I would defer that maybe to John. He knows. To give you an idea of what I'm talking about, whether the portion here at the intersection.
The little corner, yes.
Whether that would be included or not, John can confirm one way or the other.
Hi, John Willett, City Traffic Engineer, Vice Chair, Commissioner Tribbiano. That's something we've asked to be done. I don't know if we can technically force them to do it as a proper term, because it's a different property owner.
Okay.
If you look at it, it's all one farm, but that is a separate individual property owner of that hard corner. So we've asked them to work together, but I don't think we can force them to do it.
Yeah, because I can see how the residents wouldn't like that.
Right, eventually it will be improved, and if you've been out there recently, there is a traffic signal out there already that hasn't been turned on, that does allow the 2 through lanes to go northbound. We don't need the full improvements tomorrow. I mean, like, we don't need it like right away, but down the road we will need it, and we will need it by the time this hard corner gets developed.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
And one other question, Ken. The property to the north, that's going to be residential, that's a different owner also?
Vice Chair, Commissioner Trupiano, no, that's actually same owner. Lennar owns all of this.
Okay, so they know what's going on already.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And Commission, I apologize, but I'm gonna call up, I skipped a portion. I'm gonna ask Bill Alley to come up. He's the applicant and make his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, Commissioners. For the record, Bill Lally with Tiffany Bosco here tonight representing the application. And very good questions, and I'll get to a couple of those as well. And Ken did a very good job tonight of kind of going over sort of the technical requirements and the kind of the technical request. I do want to take a little bit of time and kind of talk a little bit about why we're here, kind of the couple years that got us here, because I think it's worth going through. We spent the last 3 years working with staff on this project. So there's a little bit of history I wanted to share as to why we're here. And again, you have the minor general, I'm gonna go through a couple of these slides that are redundant from Ken's presentation, just to get to maybe some of the more meatier slides that is an additional information from Ken's. Again, the difference between the general plan and the rezoning not being exactly the exact same boundaries is that the red boundary is owned by Lennar. The general plan and rezoning area is also owned by Lennar. So Lennar is our client and the applicant tonight who's planning all of these together. The rezoning doesn't need a rezone, or the red area does not need a rezoning. It has residential zoning today. They're processing a plat on that piece of property today, and I'll talk to you a little bit about the unique nature of that residential. I could have gone to this piece as well, but again, the area that looks more like a farm has purchased by Lennar, has been owned and was planned as a Phase 2 Vantana Ranch for many years. It is true the out parcel at the corner owned by Mr. Ladra, who's the farmer, who also owns another parcel to the north. We've been trying to work with them for a very long time to try to coordinate on that corner. Hopefully that does happen. As Ken was saying, you know, from a general plan standpoint, you'll often see red adjacent to the blue, as you can see to the, you know, south of the Walmart distribution center. The red is a business park commerce type of category that lends itself to be a good buffer in between traditional residential and, let's say, the blue employment. So when you add red to this category in this area, it seems to make sense from a general plan standpoint. I'll jump into the rezoning because I think that's where sort of the rest of the story can be told. As we went through the process, and this is the entire rezone area, what we tried to do is figure out what makes sense along Southern now that we have the Ross Distribution Center coming in south. This was the subdivision that butted up against Southern that was pre-platted and ready to go up until a few years ago. Well, what changed after 2001 was COVID changed, I think, the sort of housing bubble. It changed the housing prices, it changed the demographics in the area, what was needed from a housing standpoint, then led to a little bit of an economic boom here in Buckeye from an industrial. But really in 2001, we saw a start of a tick up in interest rates, supply chain issues and material costs coming out of the COVID downturn. And so about the exact same time as when Ross was finalizing their plan for a very large industrial building to the south. And so Lennar had to look at their parcel, which is directly across the street from this large industrial warehouse, and say, does this make sense? Should we build these single family homes down to Southern across the street from a very large, almost 2 million square foot building? And so the question became, maybe not. Maybe we should look at doing some sort of a transition, some other uses, because the market is a little difficult right now for housing. Let's try to make sure that we position ourselves to sell these homes in the best possible way. And so we came in 2002 with a request that was a pretty intense request. So Lennar went out and found a partner and said, if we partnered with an industrial developer and we were to sell that whole entire southern half to an industrial developer and act as a buffer to the buildings to the south, would that make sense? We spent many months with Ken, his team, and senior folks at the city that said, this is too much. This amount of industrial north of Southern with residential at Riata West to the west and your planned residential to the north, it's too much. Go back to the drawing board and come up with a more reasonable transition. We'd like to see some retail. We'd like to see some residential that is more attainable. So kind of take a look at the entire thing and start all over. Again, 3 years ago. So we spent about a year coming up with a plan. About the exact same time, Buckeye was doing a lot of good work in terms of trying to talk about the reduce the commute, trying to find employers. And I think Buckeye did a great job of finding large employers up along the I-10, planning for some of those employers along the SR-85. But really, some of the employment nodes that already had infrastructure, meaning this corner with Walmart and Ross, seemed to be attractive to a lot of users. And so we held on to a little bit of that business park employment node and followed Buckeye's lead when they talked about, let's try to reverse the commute. Let's provide housing and jobs right here in Buckeye, not just along I-10, but in other areas. At the same time, the industrial market continued to, I think, mature. I think the town did a very good, city did a very good job of planning a lot of industrial employment along I-10, along the SR-85 and the MC-85. But this was an area that was already a known node of employment. On the south side, we've all driven by large buildings. All the infrastructure was there. The employers were already there. The workforce was in the area. So we wanted to make sure that we exhausted all of our efforts to see if we could retain some employment here. At the same time, the town was declaring a housing shortage and a housing need. So all of this happened in about a year and a half as we're noodling through how to redo this plan. And so we worked with the town to say, you know what? I think if we can provide an attainable, affordable housing option that's a little bit different than what we have in our traditional subdivision to the north, we meaning Lennar, and compete with what has been coming to the market, which is the build for rent. A lot of build for rent came to the Buckeye area. A lot of build for rent came to the Phoenix metro area. But these are rentals. There's nothing wrong with that, but they're rentals. And so Lennar went to their partners and said, can we compete with that with a for sale product? And would it fit here? We have the water. We have a water certificate approved on the site. We have all the infrastructure. We have a well. We're working with the city to dedicate a second well. Everything's there. Can we do this? And so we started to go through the financial process, and Lennar came to the conclusion that yes, if we were to able to design a site plan with a retail component and an industrial component that we could sell to an industrial user right now while industrial users want to be in Buckeye, then we could subsidize the residential. And we can make this really affordable without going to the government and asking for tax credits and all of that kind of stuff. We could sell homes for less than $300,000, and these would be ownership homes. So we started to go back to the drawing board and working with Ken and his staff and all of the folks in Buckeye and really working through a couple different models by which we would maximize the residential on the north side there, the un-PAD zoning area. And then we would come up with a zoning category that allowed for multiple uses, retail, commercial, industrial, employment. And we came down to the point where we'll call a business park, because this kind of feels like business park. It doesn't feel like employment with million-square-foot buildings. It doesn't feel like manufacturing with outdoor storage. This feels like more of a business park. And so we worked with Ken and his team to split this up, as Ken indicated. Pad A is more of retail commercial. It does wrap that out parcel. Pad B is more what we would call business park, but it does have a light industrial component to it. And then we spent a lot of time as well working and negotiating on the list of uses. You saw it in your packet. It's in our packet where we went through and tightly defined the allowed uses in both PADA and PADB that fit within this area. Instead of just saying, hey, zone it C2 or zone it I1, let's do a PAD. And I would say it was probably one of the first PADs that we did here in Buckeye. It was a good experience working with Ken and his team to tightly identifying some of those uses down and really tailoring the site to what makes sense in the area. In addition to, Lennar at the same time was working with Buckeye on the northern site, dedicated an 18-acre school site, 2 well sites, bringing all the infrastructure. So this was really a shovel-ready site. We had typical subdivision, residential to the north with amenities. We had a school site. Now we have attainable housing. We have retail at the corner. And now we need to figure out this last component, which is the employment. As Ken mentioned, we went door to door. We talked to all of our neighbors in the area. What is important? As you can imagine, there are some residents in the area that say, gosh, there's already a lot of traffic out there. You know, maybe make sure that this has the smallest footprint as possible. We also talked to neighbors on the east of our side who wrote letters of support, said, we like industrial. We think it's more compatible with what we're doing. And that neighbor is here tonight to articulate that. But this letter, I think, was handed to you, and it is in the public record, just to show you that this has kind of been a, threading the needle type of process, not only working with staff on trying to better define exact uses, but working with the neighbors in the area to make sure that the uses are compatible. There were questions in the neighborhood meeting and in some of the letters and even with staff about kind of the traffic generation. And these are 2 major arterials. You got Southern, who's pushing a lot of traffic east and west, and Watson going north. There's a lot of traffic. So we utilized and looked at kind of the traffic numbers that show, what if we just went back to the old residential plan? What are the traffic drivers as opposed to, an employment type of use? And so we've shared these numbers with folks that we've talked to show if we're all residential, it's about 6 times the amount of traffic volume. And that's, usually at the peak times when everyone's trying to come home from work and their reverse commute, unfortunately. So if we can provide employment down here and jobs, and we can provide retail and services where they don't have to go north on Watson to get services, we cut down that traffic even more. So here's kind of a conceptual plan. This isn't in the packet. This is not something that we would stick to. The site plan for the retail, as Ken indicated, and the business park would come back in front of you for evaluation. But this was something that we put together that would show sort of how this would all work out. The yellow and purple are the two different residential attainable projects to the north. Again, a lot of the amenities of the Lennar project to the north would be shared among those two projects. Again, Lennar owns it all. So when Lennar is selling homes, we will be able to tell them exactly what's happening on the retail piece, exactly what's happening on the business park piece. And we control both sides of the table. So this is not a situation where an existing neighborhood has a warehouse that plops down right next to them. They say, well, hold on, I didn't buy into this. I had no idea this was coming. But as you can see, our thought process here was you have traditional residential to the north, then you have attainable residential in the yellow and purple. And then as you transition down to Southern and across the street from Ross and Walmart, which is almost 4 million square feet of employment, you then have smaller scale employment and smaller scale retail. We thought this would probably be the best kind of transition because we are in essence blocking the impacts of the Ross and Walmart and Southern from the new residential with our non-residential buildings. Now again, this isn't stipulated. It comes in front of you in a future case where you guys will have another bite at the apple. But this gives you an idea of how that would likely lay out. Again, wanted to make note of the surrounding area. A supporter next to us, probably the most impacted by this case, is here tonight to talk about the case. If you think about the folks in Riata, which we walked 500 homes over there, you know, they're going to be looking at residential across Watson or retail across Watson. They won't even be able to see the industrial from their vantage point. So really, it made sense to spend some time with our eastern neighbors, make sure that the setbacks were set back enough, make sure that the lighting standards were appropriate. You see some of those new stipulations in the handout tonight. Again, this was a situation I think that we heard a little bit about. Some of the buildings that have plopped down next to existing subdivisions that had zoning are a little close. If you look at the building that's west of Five Below, about 220 feet from the back of that building to that residential. Funko is about 800 feet. What we would be showing in the buildings located in the business park is over 1,700 feet away from residential to the west. Now, on the east, we do have unincorporated county with a mixture of business, commercial, industrial, and residential uses. We have a large swath, and we have supporters. To the south, again, Walmart's been there forever. Riata West has been there for a while. But we don't want to replicate that. We don't want to put more homes right on Southern adjacent to the Ross. We don't think that that's a good mixture. What we tried to do also is take the vantage point, because staff challenged us, said, hey guys, I don't know that we want a whole bunch of employment to the north of Southern. But if you do it, it's got to look good. So let us look at some of this imagery. There are some stipulations in the handout as well that talk about berming and landscaping and a lot of enhancements along Southern for these industrial or these business park buildings. The landscaping, although pretty lush in this photo, does replicate kind of what we've dictated in our stipulations. Again, another view of the berming, the walls, the landscaping along Southern. Probably a much different look than some of the other employment areas. So again, Lennar controls all of this today. Lennar can agree to these stipulations that help not only the look and feel on Southern, but the look and feel and the transition from their homes to some of these non-residential uses. Again, a couple renderings of what some of that commercial will look like. Now, I will tell you, if our commercial partner does get control of that hard corner, this could be a completely different animal in terms of the two properties working together. It probably will have better access and better shared parking. Hopefully that happens in the future. We wanted to show some of those. Now again, I think what Ken indicated was we went through this entire process and there were a lot of give and take in terms of the uses and things that were allowed and not allowed in order to stay business park. Where we came down and we did a lot of meetings and a lot of talking and it was staff was very generous with their time, but we came down to the two stipulations that are in your packet, C and D, that we think are probably maybe too restrictive at the zoning process. At zoning, the question is typically, does the land use work? Does the land use make sense compared to the surrounding area? Not necessarily how big a building should be or exactly where a cross-dock building should go or shouldn't go. And so as you saw in the handout, we're proposing to eliminate D&E, which are the building size and the prohibition against cross-docks. We have substituted some stipulations, and then we've also substituted and added quite a few more that would be detailed if those uses were allowed, which would allow for some of the loading and unloading, but it enhances the buffers and it adds to the area that isn't already in the stipulations. I will go back and say, I think, wrong way. Some of our concerns is we don't know, we're Lennar Homes, we don't know what the industrial is going to look like today. We want the free market to dictate what that's going to be. We think that we've skinnied down the footprint of that business park parcel down to small enough to where it's going to have limited impact on the area. The traffic is going to be less than if it were homes. What we would say is just leave the free market to figure out what kind of building goes in there. We've limited the uses down in the PAD enough to where there's not going to be unsavory uses, inconsistent uses. I know crossdock was something on staff's list. I think we want to be able to keep that ability to do that. Maybe it never comes. We don't know. But we're not the commercial developer. So we just want to leave the free market to allow for that to happen. If there's too many restrictions placed on it, Lennar may have a hard time finding a partner. And if they can't get a partner, it may sit vacant, which means the improvements don't happen, which means the subsidies to the housing doesn't happen. It just becomes a vacant parcel for a while until we figure out what it looks like. We don't want that to happen. We want this entire PAD to build out. But again, I can't tell you today I have a 400,000 square foot cross-dock building that wants to move in tomorrow, but I can't tell you that there isn't. And so all we're asking tonight is to remain a little bit of flexibility in the zoning case. It comes before you in the future. You guys will have another bite at the apple. These extra steps, D and E, talk a little bit about, now D should probably be a little reworded a little bit to allow for the 400 square foot building. E allows for the cross-dock. F and G and H are really just stipulations that allow for, if those uses are in there, more screening, more berming, more transition. The last stip, which is I, is an outdoor lighting stipulation that as we talk to our neighbor to the east and others in the area, the email that's in your packet talks about lighting. What we've added is 7 lighting stipulations there that really kind of talk to a dark sky type of lighting. We think that's appropriate for the area. So lastly, I know it was a long story. You probably didn't want to hear the whole story, but we've had 3 years of negotiations with staff, and we think we've really come down to a project that's going to work. It's got a little bit of everything. It's got residential that the town needs, city needs. It's got some retail that the neighbors want and have asked for. And it's got a little bit of employment there that acts as a transition to the larger employment to the south. So we feel like this project is a winning project. We do appreciate staff support. We appreciate their support for the PAD. We appreciate the outreach that's done and some of the neighbors who have commented to make this a better project. But we would ask for your support in addition to maybe some of the revised tips that we've added tonight. But short of that, be happy to answer any question, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lally, and I apologize to you for not calling you in order.
No, you're fine.
If we can continue. Sebastian, you have more questions?
Not really. I can wait after you hear from the public.
Thank you. Mr. Bassler?
First of all, I'm totally confused and may help me sort this one out. Plan 3A is a change from neighborhood to business commercial. That is the first one. So we're changing 44 acres from neighborhood to business commercial. In number 2, we're going to add in 11 more acres, which is pad A, and we're going to move planned residential, which we just moved to business commercial, to planned area development. That's where I'm confused. We just changed it from one thing to another, and we went back to the original to change it to something else. So can you explain that process?
Yes, Vice Chair, Commissioner Basler. The first change from neighborhood to business commerce is a general plan change. The general plan is different than zoning. The general plan is the city's long-term vision for land uses. It's a bigger guiding type of document. And what the general plan does is basically establishes the types of rezonings that we're able to consider. So if the long-term vision for the city of a particular property is yellow here, and somebody proposes a nuclear power plant, heavy industrial type of thing, and they want to rezone the property to industrial within that yellow area, we say, as a city, we say, no, that's not in line with the vision. We can't support that rezoning. So in order to allow for the second step, which is the rezoning to allow for the business park types of uses on that 43-ish acres, we have to first change that overall vision document, which is the general plan. The second step, the rezoning, is the actual meat and potatoes, if you will. That's the guiding document that will have the most impact on the future development of the property.
Okay. I think I understand what you're saying. We'll work at that. You call this a transition from the warehouses on the south side of Southern to residential on the north side. But one of the proposals with the cross dock is a warehouse. So in essence, you're going to put a warehouse on the north side of Southern, when in fact you're trying to get away from the warehouses and do a transition. So I'm back where the city is of restricting the largest building that you can have to 200,000 square feet, to stop it from being a warehouse over there, and make it a business center. I understand that with the business center going in there, that could be a form of transition from the warehousing that we have on the south side of Southern to the north side, which is all residential. Thank you.
Mr. Damascus.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for sharing the story. You explained it in a way that I can actually understand, and I really appreciate you working with the city to have this mixed kind of bag here all in one area to give all the different kind of options. Can I get a definition on cross-dock, what that means?
Either way.
Mr. Vice Chair and Commissioner, cross-dock is where there's a building, you'll see it if you go up and down Southern, where there is kind of an open bay door on one side of the building and an open roll-up door on the other side. And so the goods come in from one truck from California, they're offloaded inside of the facility, and then maybe they're distributed into other trucks on the other side, and then those go out to maybe another distribution in Phoenix, or maybe even to the final point of delivery at a Walmart or a Target or something like that. So it's a sorting center. Trucks come in, trucks go out.
Okay.
And did I get that right?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. All of the Five Below and the Funko, for instance, are cross docks. They have two sides, very long sides with dock doors on each side. One side typically, and not always this way, the users can use it differently, but typically the one side receives the shipments maybe from the port. They take these large shipments, sort it within the building, and then smaller orders then maybe would go out to the individual stores. So yeah, the character of those buildings looks a lot like this, which is, your Five Below, Funko. Okay. They're typically long. They have two ends that kind of look like offices, which, typically we like to get those up against the street, so it doesn't have much of a aesthetic impact, and then the other elevations are primarily service.
Okay. Because to me, it seemed like the cross dock was exactly the picture where you had the two buildings and the docks were in between the two buildings. Like that was kind of my interpretation of the cross dock. So thank you for that explanation. Final question is, On the east side of the property, it shows that you're butting up to that county island and that residential. Is that a road that's gonna be developed, or is it something that you guys are ever gonna need to, develop as well, as far as, just like you do with Southern and Watson?
Sure, Ken, I don't know if you can go to that kind of rendering or that conceptual.
Can you go to
plan.
your plan?
Yeah, or if you have it up. The idea is our facility, I don't know if you could blow that up, but
Yeah, I can see.
so there is a county road that splits the property line. Ken's doing a pretty good job of, maybe not.
I
So
could get there, yeah.
the question is, no, we don't want to put truck traffic out on that road that serves those residential uses to our east. This is a pretty good, so you can see where there is the road on the furthest east that serves those properties. And then you've got where the red dots are, a pretty significant landscape buffer. And then our driveway. So we're gonna keep all of our traffic internal to our property and not use that eastern driveway at all.
Okay, that's actually what I was hoping for, so
Yeah.
thank you very much. No further questions.
Thank you. Ms. Cupsack?
Thank you for your presentation, but I don't have any questions at this time. Thanks.
Ms. Ragsdale?
Yes, I don't understand. You talked about across the street from Walmart and across the street from Ross as being the same, whereas across the street from Walmart is housing and across the street from Ross isn't. It's what we're talking about now. So it's different. You're talking about a transition, but you want to put a warehouse there, but you're transitioning from warehouses with another warehouse. I have a hard time with that.
Gotcha. Mr. Vice Chair and Commissioner, I think what the point I was trying to make is that the plat today has homes that go all the way down to Southern, just like Riata West, right across the street from Walmart. And we're trying not to replicate that. We're trying to have instead of the transition of Ross to single family right north of Southern, what we're trying to do is have that transition on our side, meaning that folks who buy homes in the Lennar development will know that they're buying homes next to an industrial/business park setting that we designed to be compatible with them. We can't do anything about what Ross is doing on their frontage. We can't do anything about the size and impact of Ross. We just don't want to replicate what Riata West did, which was build right across the street from Walmart. What we're trying to do is pull that transition up onto our side of the property and have a smoother transition between residential, smaller buildings with lots of landscaping, and then our industrial will face Ross. I don't know if I explained it further.
But when they did the master plan, wasn't the purpose to have housing there and warehouses up aligning with the railroad track?
Vice Chair, Commissioner Ragsdale, when you say master plan, you mean like the general plan?
Yeah.
Yeah, the general plan did contemplate those two occurring adjacent to each other. I think there is an argument whether that was a great idea or not. I don't think it's necessarily, something that makes it unlivable to back up to a warehouse, but, certainly some people probably would prefer not to do that.
That's all, thank you.
Very good presentation. I learned a lot what your vision is, but my one question is, what kind of activities do you plan on that building where you need an extra 15 feet in height? I mean, you did say you don't really know what's going in there yet, but there must be some idea, right?
Yeah, Mr. Vice Chair and Commissioner, in today's world, in talking to almost all of the users, I think the 50 feet is kind of an older standard of any business park type of, we don't have a user today, so I can't tell you how they're gonna use that other 15 feet and whether it's gonna be the final result of that user or not. I think that what we tried to do is say, if we're gonna go a little higher, 15 feet higher, let's go back 25 feet more. You know, so a lot of zoning codes will have a 1-for-1. Like, hey, you want to get, 10 more feet on a building, you got to go back 10 feet further away from. And so I think Ken and staff pushed us a little bit more and said, if you want 15, you're going to have to push back 25 more feet. So as much as I can't answer your question about what is the user that needs 65 feet, I'll tell you that what we tried to do is make sure that we minimize any impact. If we do go a little higher, it's got to be set back, pretty considerable.
Okay, I was just wondering what type of activities it's going in. But if you don't know, so you're just doing this to make it maybe more marketable or something, is that?
Mr. Vice Chair, that's exactly it. Honestly, we represent Lennar. Lennar builds really great homes, but they've gone out to the industry and asked the industrial experts, hey, what should we plan for this property to make it marketable so we can attract a good user? And they said, this height, the size makes a lot of sense.
Okay, thank you.
Just have a comment, and it's for you, Mr. Traffic Engineer. With all that traffic going down that street, what do you propose to do? I was just on that, driving in that particular area this morning, and it's pretty challenging to say the least.
Vice Chair, when you say that street, you mean Watson
It's all of it.
and Southern?
All of it, Mr. Willett.
With Ventana Ranch Phase 1 doing their improvements, they will build the entire east side along their frontage. We'll have enough pavement for some additional lanes there. With Phase 2 coming in, they will do the same thing going south. Pretty much all the driveways or intersections that come out of this development to go north, more lanes to go north. We have a city CIP project to improve the intersection of Broadway and Watson. We're putting a traffic signal in there. That will be in, I won't say way before they're in, but it'll be in before they're in. We are looking, hopefully, if I'll make my plug for the GO bond. The GO bond passes in 5 weeks from today. There'll be money made available to do some improvements to Watson along the area north of Monroe Ranch, where the RID canal goes through. That's a county. There's just those parcels of land that were built a long time ago. They're not going to come in for new development tomorrow. So the city is responsible for those half-street improvements. The GO bond will provide some financing to do that. And we have a project that's been designed, it's just holding to improve Watson between Broadway and Lower Buckeye up to Inca. We'll put some signals in there. So by the time this project comes on board, we should definitely have Watson improved, at least 2 lanes in each direction to accommodate vehicles coming.
Thank you, sir. I could always count on you to fix everything.
I'm trying my best, just money. But we'll get there.
Yes, we will. Thank you, Mr. Willis. I'm going to open this up for public hearing. Madam Carrie, I have one speaker request. If there's any more, they're on the podium there on the corner should you want to speak. But at this time, I'll call Mr. Wayne Kirkpatrick. You can come up to where Mr. Lally was and state your name, your address, please, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Wayne Kirkpatrick. I appreciate you guys hearing me on this particular matter. I've lived in the city of Buckeye for over 50 years. Our place there on 231st Avenue in Southern, I've never lived more than 5 miles from that radius since my time in Buckeye. A gentleman came to our door and knocked on the door to talk to us about this particular project, and they were open with me. It seemed very open. I've had some other projects within the city of Buckeye that were kind of maybe a little bit from behind the scenes, and I appreciated them coming and talking to me in front. They laid everything out. They had a laptop. They showed me some stuff. We have just built a very nice house there. Very, very nice house, probably overbuilt for the neighborhood, but it's our home. We do have concerns about what's going on, buffers, different distances, but at the same time, I do have a shop building there that we manufacture small parts and different stuff out of that. So I personally would much rather have that next to my house than what we have down here by the post office. So I'm glad that I would much rather have that as a property owner and a homeowner right there than dealing with that kind of stuff. So I'm here in support of Lennar. They've been open with me. That's so far has been in good standings with myself. I am right on the corner of 231st Avenue and Southern. I'm in the Maricopa County area, but I am in support of their project at this time. So I don't know if you guys have any questions for me. I appreciate your time, but
Thank you, Mr. Kirkpatrick. We can't ask you any questions, but thank you, sir.
okay, thank you.
Sure, come on up now. If I could get you to state your name, your address.
Name is Vanessa Fulton. I live in the Riata West neighborhood at 23551 West Wayland Drive. So I've been there since Riata West opened, so 2008, and I can tell you I'm all for commercial development, you know, in the city of Buckeye. What concerns me about this project is the potential for the cross-docking. Okay, I mean, I knew that the Walmart distribution center was there when I moved in, and it's gotten increasingly worse, you know, I mean, busier as, you know, as time has gone on. And if we actually have more warehouses north of Southern, regardless of the size, that traffic on Southern is just going to be outrageous. I mean, it's bad anyway on Southern when you're trying to go either way. And I know Buckeye has limited, you know, which streets, you know, semis can use. So that makes Southern all, you know, even worse. So that is really my only and biggest concern. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Being that there are no other speaker requests, I will close this public hearing. Commissioners, may I have a motion to ensure?
We got to take them separate.
A motion?
Chair, I would like to make a motion to accept the minor general plan amendment PLZU-24-0001. Is that all I need to say?
You said.
Vice Chair and Commissioner Kupchak, it would be recommend for approval. To
Recommend
the council.
approval to the council. Yeah.
Thank you.
A second?
It's been moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Chair, can you ask how many, if anybody's opposed, please?
Are there any opposed? Motion passes. Open it up for another public hearing.
Vice Chair, for a clear record, I recommend introducing item 3B on the record and then proceeding into the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Regular agenda item 3B, Ventana Ranch, number 2, rezoning to planned area development, PLZZ 24-0002. Presentations were already given at this time, and I will open it up for a public hearing. Madam Secretary, any request? We'll close this public hearing. May I have a motion?
I will make a motion to approve PLZZ-24-0002 as specified by the city without modifications.
A second?
And Vice Chair and Commissioner Bassler, does that include the conditions A through P recommended by staff?
To include A through P, yes.
And Commissioner Damasio, does your second include that as well?
A second.
Thank you. It has been moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed?
Motion carries. All right. Agenda item number 4, comments from the public. Does anyone wish to speak? All right. Go to number 5, planning manager report and summary of current events. Ian.
Good evening again. First of all, I want to thank Bill and the Lennar folks for coming tonight. I don't want to give the impression that we are at odds. We agree on 98% of the project, and these are just the little details that sometimes you're never going to find agreement on, but I think we're committed to working with them on an excellent project still. So thank you for coming out. The only other thing I wanted to mention, you got your microphone training today. In the future, I don't know if it's next meeting or not, but we will be doing some electronic voting training with the clerk's office. They'll, as well as Kevin Drury in IT, they'll be explaining how your new fancy schmancy systems will work. If you didn't see your names and lights when you got here this morning, or evening, I should say, yeah, you're superstars now, so that looks good. Next meeting, we will be having vice chair and chair elections with former Chair Hudak now in Idaho, I think. Yeah, we'll need to elect a new chair and then, well, potentially a vice chair. I don't think that's a guarantee though, right? So yeah. We do have a scheduled meeting in 2 weeks from now. We will be having a workshop beforehand. We'll have food available. That will be on the landing specific area plan. So we'll have our consultant, Ed Boyk, your former familiar face with Matrix, and they'll be talking to you and giving you an update.
Cool beans. Thank you, Ken. Anyone from the commission have any current events?
I've got nothing.
I would like everybody to invite everybody to come out for sangria and shopping this weekend. We have a car show right out in front, the Show and Shine car show. And we also have the Rock and Gym show that's going to be at the Equestrian Center. So that's on Saturday. Well, the Rock and Gym show's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Sangria and shopping is from 9 a.m. until 2, so we'll be done before it gets real hot. Ha, ha, ha.
Tripiato. You have anything?
Nope.
Mr. Bassler?
No, thank you.
Mr. Massey?
It's not a current event, but it is a question amongst the community in the district. Is there a possibility we can talk to or get an answer or an update on the signal that's going to be going into the Festival Ranch neighborhood? Is there any update on that? Mr. Traffic Control? Right time.
And Vice Chair and members of the commission, we will discuss that request and then circle back around and see if we can answer those questions and give an update at a later date and time when that's been agendized. Thank you.
Roger that. I have no further questions or answers.
Well, I'd like to thank you, and I'd like to thank you, Mr. Willits, especially, for coming out tonight. I'll see you all next 2 weeks. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.